What's up guys, welcome back to the channel and another video. Today's video was actually meant to be a POV. I went out the other day, put on the GoPro, went to take some photos at sunrise and didn't really get a sunrise at all. Got a lot of clouds, a little bit of rain and a lot of bad photos. So instead of that being today's video, I thought I would give you a little insight into how I've been editing the film photos that you've seen in the recent videos. So I really haven't done too much film photography, but I am really happy with the recent results that I got. You guys seen the video and seem to like them too, so I thought I would sort of let you see what I've been doing and how I get the final results. So I don't really do too much. I don't want to be going in and drastically changing colors and adding different looks in, because I want the film to look how it was supposed to look, and maybe a little bit of my own style added to it, but it's very subtle. I'm just kind of adjusting highlights and shadows, maybe the white balance a little bit, and just making some subtle tweaks just to give it my own little touch, but it really isn't too much. As I mentioned before here in the channel, I am a big fan of Kyle McDougall and his photography, and obviously if you know him, you know he does a lot of film photography, and as he says, when you get your film developed and scanned, there is a little bit of editing going on, and depending on the scanner and stuff used, the scans that you receive can have slight differences to them and little tints or maybe a little more contrast. So you just want to bring it back to what it probably would have looked like at the time and then make subtle little adjustments, which is what I do. So I've picked 4 photos, 2 from the last roll and 2 from the roll before that, and let's just jump into Lightroom and I'll show you how I edit them. Okay, so the first one I have is this landscape scene with the woodshed from Donegal. You may have seen that in the video. Probably my favourite from that trip, and definitely one of my favourites, if not my favourite photo that I've took on film so far. As you can see with the scan here, not much contrast starting off, and the saturation is quite low as well. But first off, what I'm going to do is just add in a little bit of warmth, because it definitely looks a little bit cooler and there's a little bit more of a magenta tint to it than there was at the time, if I remember right. So something like that looks a little bit better, and I'm actually going to crop it first. So let's see if the transform works for me. Alright, so that's pretty much ideal. This woodshed here was pretty straight in the shot. I made sure to line that vertical line up, and that looks pretty good to me. So obviously I need to add a little bit of contrast first, something like that, and then I'm going to bring the highlights down because the sky is a little bit overexposed, and we can bring some detail out of those clouds and add a little bit more blue into the sky, something like that. I'm also going to bring the shadows down because I like my photos to have quite dark shadows. I like quite a contrasty, punchy sort of look to them. Something like that. I'm going to bring the whites up just a little bit. Something like that. And then the blacks down a little bit. Probably somewhere in around there. And already you can see quite the difference. And I'm just going to add a little bit of dehaze just to bring in some more contrast as well. Something like that looks pretty good. And I also want to bring in some more saturation. The colors and everything and the white balance and stuff looks pretty good to me. To the eye it looks pretty close to how it did at the time. And now I'm just going to add in some saturation and increase the vibrance a bit as well, just to bring the greens back, because the saturation on those is quite low and the wood could do with being warmed up a little bit as well. So something like that, and then a little bit of saturation here, and we're already looking pretty good. I think pretty close. Another little technique I like to use is I'll add a little bit more warmth to the shadows, just a little bit, because even though there is snow in the mountains, it did have a warm feel to it. So something like that, just a little bit. Might be hard to tell, but it just adds a little bit of warmth to those shadows, which I like. And then sharpening, I'm going to bring up to about 40 or so, I normally do. And then masking at, let's say, 50. This is a little bit more of a rough edit just to show you, but it's pretty close to the way I originally done it. And then I'm going to come right down to the bottom, and I'm just going to increase the saturation of the blue primary here in the calibration section to about 17, 18. And that just brings a little bit more saturation back to the browns and the greens, or the orange sort of tones. And I mean, we're pretty good there, I think. I could add a little bit more contrast with the curve tool, but I don't think I did in the original one, and to be fair, I quite like that, and I think that's pretty close to the way I originally did the edit for the video. I also used a little bit of the spot removal just for this little white thing down here, which was quite distracting. It's just the end of the plug that connects to the trailer. I also did it on this bag here, or bucket, or whatever that is in the grass, was kind of distracting, but everything else I thought looked pretty good, so yeah. And that is pretty much it for that one. Like I said, subtle adjustments, trying to bring the contrast and the saturation back, just adjusted the white balance ever so slightly, and then just add a little bit of warmth into the shadows and just make sure that it is the style that I want it to be, but it pretty much was anyway, so I didn't have to do too much. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So this one, if you've seen the video, was quite tricky to expose. The sun was hitting the side of this little shed, which was bright white at the time. So yeah, but luckily with film there's quite a dynamic range, and you're essentially working in reverse. When you're shooting film, you're exposing more for the shadows, and then when you're editing, you're bringing the highlights back, whereas digital is kind of the opposite. You're exposing for the highlights, and then when you edit, you raise the shadows and everything up. So kind of in reverse. But again, for this one, I'm actually going to white balance first. So the shed was white. That's going to add a little bit. I might add... No, that looks pretty good. So obviously one of the main things here is bringing those highlights back. It's quite ridiculous how much detail film can hold in those highlights. I think that looks pretty good. I don't want to bring all the highlights out of the sky. I just want to bring those down a little bit. It was very bright, but that is how it looked, so we'll keep it there for now. I'm going to bring those shadows down. I'm going to increase the whites a little bit just to make sure that the whites in the image are pretty close to white, something like that. Obviously, because I'm shooting indoors to outdoors, the contrast around the door and the inside here is pretty extreme, but that is kind of the look I was going for. I just wanted to make sure that there was a nice bit of light hitting the door here, and you could sort of see the green and a little bit of reflection of outside, as well as the handle, which I thought was pretty cool and added something to it. That looks pretty good there, I think. I'm actually going to crop this as well, and again I might use the transform to see if that helps me line things up. And it does. It just makes that little adjustment to straighten things. Almost got it right, but I'm going to adjust it just to make sure the outside of the little shed is straight. That looks pretty good to me. And then again I'm going to add a little bit of the dehaze, which adds a little bit of contrast and brings back some of the saturation. So I'm pretty much doing the same as I done in the last photo, and that is the nice thing about film, because I'm shooting a lot of these photos in and around the same time with the same sort of lighting, and I was overexposing them all pretty much the same amount. The edits end up being pretty much the same. So I'm going to increase the vibrance to about 18, and a little bit of saturation as well. And we're already looking pretty good. Again, I'm going to bring the blue primary up in the calibration section to somewhere around 18, maybe 20. And I think that we're almost good to go. I'll bring the sharpness up again. I'm just going to do this the same as the last one because you probably can't really tell. But focus was pretty good in this one. I believe I shot it at f8 or f11. And as you can see, the before and after straightened up, highlights are brought back, saturation is increased, and that looks pretty much how it did to me at the time, and I really like it. Again, not too much, pretty much the same as the first photo, and you get those results which I just really like. Just in case you can't tell, I am sitting on the floor and I had to move sides because I have a dead leg now. Getting a nice setup for videos like this is a little bit tricky, and I haven't got my desk set up at the minute, so this is what I'm dealing with. Alright, so the next shot was from the previous photo vlog at the dam, and I was using Fomapan 400 for these shots, as you may have seen. And this shot of the bench was probably one of my favourites from this video as well. And as you can see straight off the bat, the contrast is not quite there. And because I'm getting TIFF scans, they try and get as much detail back from the scan as possible. So you kind of end up with a flatter image, which is sort of similar to shooting digital, where you shoot raw and it's quite flat and the saturation's not there. Kind of similar when you get the TIFF scans back, I believe. I'm not sure if that's the case with all the scans, if you get lower quality JPEG scans, for example. But the TIFF files that I get here have a lot of detail in them, and obviously starts off quite flat. So first things first, I'm going to increase the exposure just a little bit, and then I'm going to add in a little bit of contrast, which obviously I don't need to worry about saturation in this. It's all about the contrast and getting it how I wanted it to look. So I'm going to decrease the highlights a little bit, just to take the super brightness off the sky and the side of the bench, because the light was coming in, as you can see, from the left hand side here and just hitting the side of the bench. But I think that's good enough there. I'm actually going to increase the shadows a little bit and then lower the blacks. So something like that. I'm going to increase the whites as well. Just trying to add in the contrast to where I want it to be. And then I'm going to decrease the blacks quite a bit because, like I said, I do like a really contrasty image. That, I think, looks quite good. See the before and after. So yeah, it just takes that flat look off it and adds the contrast back in. I'll maybe add a little bit of dehaze as well. Not too much because we're already quite contrasty, but I already really like how that looks. And to be honest, besides sharpening, I don't think I really need to do much more. On the original image, I did also use the spot removal tool to remove these little white marks on the ground, because on black and white they really stand out and I thought it was a little bit distracting. So I removed some of those. Obviously, any of you who play around with Lightroom will know how to do that quite easily. It really doesn't take too long, but it just is quite noticeable in black and white. So I wanted to get rid of some of those, and obviously I spent a little bit more time doing that in the original edit. But really from here it would just be adding in some sharpness. And when I edited the original photos, what I would do is add a little bit in Lightroom, and then I would use the high pass filter in Photoshop just to add in a little bit more in certain areas, which I think worked quite well. But again, I am quite new to editing film scans, so it may change over time, but I was quite happy with how these ones turned out. And to be fair, that is pretty much all I'd done besides some more spot removal. And as you can see, the before and after, yeah, I quite like how that turned out. The final photo is another photo of a bench. If you've been watching the videos for any period of time, you'll know that I'm quite fond of a photo of a bench, and it can be a picnic bench or just a normal bench. I'm easy, but I like taking photos of them. I just think they make nice subjects, and they're always sitting in spots that I think just it just fits very well with the landscape, and this one is no exception. I definitely didn't get my lines right in this one. Those trees are a bit lopsided, as well as the bench, so let's straighten those up a little bit. Something like that is quite good, I think. And then this one's pretty much the same again. Obviously, as you can see, I was dealing with quite a dynamic range in this one. The sky was overcast, but it was quite bright, and then I have the very dark tree line here, and then the bench has some shadows, but the light was sort of hitting the bench a little bit, which helped and make it stand out. So if I just bring those shadows down, you can see all that cloud detail coming back, which is quite nice. Then I'm just going to increase the shadows to bring back some detail around that tree line and also the bench and the grass area. And I'm also going to increase the whites just to make sure the white parts of the sky are quite close to white, because it was quite bright in between the clouds. And then I'm going to bring the blacks back down to add that contrast back in the really dark parts of the image. Something like that. And that's kind of how I like my black and white images to look, really punchy, but I want to keep the detail in certain areas. And same as the previous images, just a little bit of dehaze. Obviously I don't need to worry about saturation in this one. And then once again, sharpening. Probably quite pointless showing you the sharpening saying as I've done the same thing like 4 times, but that is the process that I go through. So besides maybe just a little crop just to take a little bit of that sky out, probably something like that, I think we are pretty good to go, and I'm pretty happy with that. I did do a little bit of spot removal, I think, for some little marks on the grass that were annoying me, but besides that, that is the final result. Pretty happy with it. So I mean, yeah, that's pretty much how I've been editing my film scans. Like I said at the start, there haven't been too many of them. I've only shot like, what, 3 rolls, 4 now, but I haven't even seen the 4th one yet. So yeah, that's how I've been doing it. I might adjust that process as I go, but I've been really happy, and with each roll, the results have got better and better as I get used to it. Yeah, it's quite a fun process. I definitely prefer editing the film scans than the digital photos, just because I think when you get the film scans back, it's an easier edit and it already looks closer to the final result or how it looked at the time than digital photos, where when you expose for the highlights and stuff, you end up with a really dark image that doesn't really look anything like it did at the time. I know it's quite easy to edit those too, and you just increase the shadows and stuff, but I've been having fun editing the film photos, and I look forward to editing many more. But hopefully you found this helpful in some way or other. Definitely not an expert yet when it comes to editing film scans, but I'm learning with each roll that I shoot, so hopefully some of that was helpful to you. And I've shot a few more rolls over the past few days, which you'll see soon on the channel. And also the exciting news that I've talked about, hopefully we'll be able to do a live stream. It will probably be done by the time this video goes up, so if it is, then you already know. But anyway, I'll leave it there and I'll stop blabbering on in this one. Like I said, hopefully it was helpful. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give the video a thumbs up. Maybe consider subscribing if you want to see more. And yeah, as we always say, take it easy. Don't be a stranger. I have a completely dead leg. That's always fun. Nasty.